This is Include, a Microsoft Partner Network podcast exploring our shared experiences in technology and business.
Because there's really a kind of amazing cycle of activity that's happening in developing and emerging markets around the world. When people ask us where our husbands are, we just sort of have to laugh and say, well, at home. You should be uncomfortable. You're not going to create anything new out of your own head.
In this podcast, we're having honest conversations on how to build more inclusive cultures. Welcome back to the Microsoft Partner Network. Today, we're super excited to have Kate Woska over Skype. She is actually all the way in Rwanda talking to us. So thank you for being here, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
So Kate is a young female entrepreneur and actual founder of Atikus. She is a Microsoft partner and really doing amazing things for emerging markets and around financial institutions. Kate, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you founded Atikus?
Sure. So I'm American originally and started my career in very traditional financial services. Working at Citibank in New York. And basically over my time at Citi, which was great, we had a lot of exposure to working with clients and financial services in developing markets. And always sort of wanted to do something that was socially impactful, where I could really get my hands dirty. And so it was during that time that I conceived of the original idea behind Atikus, which is really meant to help clients, low-income clients, whether they're individuals or small businesses, better access financial services. I think something unique that we do is we look at it from an institutional lens versus a consumer lens. So just given my background in sort of that large financial institution, I started putting a team together and we started building what today is Atikus.
So let's talk a little bit more about the business itself. Why did you create that? And then how exactly does it work?
Sure. I think how it works maybe comes before why we created it. But essentially what we wanted to build was a better way for organizations in the financial space, whether they be financial institutions. So sometimes it's a commercial bank, sometimes it's a microfinance institution or a different type of investor or a guarantee fund. So there's really a lot of types of financial organizations, but also the organizations that are doing financial training. So there's a lot of organizations that are teaching low-income clients what is a loan, how to manage, expenses and income for their business on a day-to-day basis. So all of these sort of players in what we consider like the financial inclusion space, how do we help them first better identify, engage, and communicate with their clients? Maybe they have trouble finding the right clients who need these types of services. Maybe they have a hard time onboarding them or understanding who they are or their needs or where they are in the state of their business or their level of financial literacy. And then really, once we sort of look at this ecosystem as a whole, which is very interconnected, how can we sort of bridge initiatives together? So really, the clearest example is how do we take individuals who have taken part in these really wonderful financial literacy trainings, and how do we sort of introduce them to the financial institutions that might be giving them loans or savings accounts or insurance or other types of financial products that, now they're maybe in a better position to use having gone through these trainings. Because there's really a kind of amazing cycle of activity that's happening in developing and emerging markets around the world. And so that's really what we look at. The things that we're really focusing on at an organizational level are, of course, financial inclusion. How do you bring more people into the fold, and particularly underserved demographics? So women, youth, rural and agricultural workers. Those are traditionally very underserved groups. So how can we increase their representation without proportionally increasing risk? And so and I think the flip side of that is also just a move to technology. Africa in particular is really unique in the way that they're leapfrogging over traditional technologies, embracing sort of what we might consider like new frontier. And so how can we sort of put tools in place that obviously support the client needs and the mission of these organizations, but also, advance the capacities of clients and individuals and communities.
I love what you're talking about with financial inclusion, because it's not enough to recognize the diverse communities and thought and perspectives that we have. The financial piece is huge and a very important limiting factor in us having inclusive environments and actually creating more opportunities. So it's a really unique formula that you're creating, Kate. Can you talk a little bit more about the technology itself and how you created the software? Because I believe the Microsoft Partner Network kind of came into play here for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a web-based application that we configure for these different institutional clients. We'll also be building an interface where those individuals themselves can interact with the platform, which we're really excited about. In developing it, we worked with an organization called Infusion, who's a longtime member of the Microsoft network. We have just an amazing relationship with Infusion. We had strong relationships from the New York office when I used to be based in New York. And we actually ended up doing the ultimate develop in Krakow with one of their Poland teams. And it was just this incredible hands-on experience. I'm not a technical founder, so I didn't know the first thing about coding. Our team just had a vision and we needed help executing it. And with Infusion's support and insight, obviously the relationship with Microsoft became key in sort of developing the architecture and now sort of the ongoing support. But really it was our relationship with Infusion that took this dream and this sort of a back of a napkin concept and made it a reality. We do use a number of the Microsoft tools, of course. The application is cloud-based, so we run it on Azure. We also have a fairly extensive survey type mechanism built into the platform, and for that we use Dynamics. And then, of course, our core database is run on SQL.
I love it. All the good products, Kate.
Huge fan of Excel. I'm the biggest Excel nerd. So much to my team's dismay, I would put meeting notes in Excel if I could. So
we have OneNote too, Kate,
I know, but I grew up in the financial services space, and I'm telling you, you
live and die. Yep. Kate, so I think it's really interesting. You're New York based. However, you're sitting in Rwanda right now. Why are you in Rwanda?
So Rwanda is really where the action is. For a while, I was New York based, and now my sort of home base is more in Europe. And then I'm in Rwanda a couple months out of the year with other smaller trips back and forth. Rwanda is a really interesting market. I mean, it's incredibly unique, which obviously has its pros and cons. But in terms of business environment, social environment, regulatory environment, Rwanda was just kind of the perfect place for us to put down roots. Especially when you take sort of like the inclusive angle, you have an incredibly unique and progressive administration here where financial inclusion is a top priority along with, the corresponding activities like financial literacy education. You also have a tremendous amount of agricultural activity, women and youth empowerment. Rwanda is sort of very famous for having the largest percentage of women in their parliament in the world. So like 68%, maybe 65 now, but well over 60% of Rwanda's parliament is female. And it's really kind of an interesting outcome of what was obviously like a pretty dramatic tragedy that happened here in the early 90s. which I try not to use that as sort of part of Rwanda's story, because I think the country has accomplished a tremendous amount since then, that's completely independent of that story. But, Rwanda, it is a fact that women were a critical force in rebuilding the country after the genocide. And also, just by nature of the genocide that was here, you have a very young population. And so the government is incredibly pro-female empowerment, youth advancement, because, there's just a lot of women and a lot of youth. And the country is forward-looking and very intelligent in the way that they design and implement policies. And then, beyond that, you have a very robust financial services industry, a large community of development organizations. And we're just really looking to take the good work that's being done and bring it all together and continue to help move it forward.
It's super interesting what you're talking about here. You're talking about a group of females and the impact that the government is making in kind of fostering an environment that somebody like you believes this is where business can get done. And I think that's really special. How do you think that affects the people that you work with? What kind of opinions and thought process do you find are just different there in Rwanda than, let's say here in the States?
I think the overarching and very tangible feeling you get here, specifically in Rwanda, but I think you can certainly find it elsewhere, is really the sense of possibility and future. I mean, I wasn't here after the genocide, but by most accounts, the country was in ruins. No infrastructure, no economy, no workforce, no will. And like I said, I think, no government is perfect, but this government is owed a tremendous amount of credit in building not only a current, current situation, which is incredible, but also building a very clear path to a very promising future. And I think it's something that the entire country, whether it's the CEO of a large organization or, a housekeeper and everybody in between, everybody is moving towards that goal, without question. So when we look at how deals at the top are being done, how communities, so it's kind of amazing. Once a month, every Rwandan does collective community service together as a neighborhood. So they help plant trees, they help clean up, gutters, they help build new sidewalks, whatever it is. And communities do it as a group, because it's about, Rwanda is a beautiful country, and it's in part because Rwandans are proud of what they've accomplished and they're proud of the future that they're building for themselves. And so that sort of really well-deserved optimism is a great environment to do business in. You couple that with an incredibly efficient infrastructure that the government has set up where you can register a business in one day. You can pay all of your taxes online on one website.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
It's like countries have a lot to learn from what's been done here. And, while they're incredibly proud of what they've accomplished, they're also very humble. They understand the limitations in place. They understand what needs to be done next. They ask for help when, they don't have the capacity themselves. So, it's a very humble way of just getting it done. And so from a business perspective, especially as an outsider, you really find that there's people who want to use technology, that there is an entrepreneurship ecosystem that, even with the degree of development activity here, which in some countries sort of creates sort of a sluggish environment. Here you have NGOs talking about making investments in technology and capacity building for financial institutions. It's very private sector focused, which, is sort of person with my background, I tend to agree with. And certainly as somebody running an enterprise and operating in this country, it's great.
Yeah. What's interesting about what you're saying is while you're talking about this country, this whole area, which we barely talk about, Rwanda, and how the culture, the mindset, you said proud, you said they're humble, they're optimistic, they give back to their community. There's a lot to learn, I think, for those listening and how they can foster that into their businesses. It seems like you could learn from Rwanda. If you can take some of those tips and infuse that into your culture, you could actually create a true inclusive environment. Would you say that, Kate?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not perfect. No place is. There are, bad actors and slow processes and bureaucracy. Rwanda has its fair share of problems, but it also wouldn't, being able to see the problems lets you know that the good is as true as the bad. And the good far outweighs the bad. Whereas I think if you were to come here and say, oh, wow, everything is too perfect, you'd say, well, what's, under the surface kind of thing. So, there is also a degree of transparency that I think, especially when you start looking at, inclusion, whether you're talking about health or finance or education, whatever it is, really being able to say with honesty and transparency, our women are struggling to access financial services because of XYZ, or our youth, are having trouble accessing insurance, or, whatever it is. I think that is really important. And then also the self-awareness of a country that can say, we have groups that are underserved. We're not pretending like women are, at parity with men, or that, banks trust agriculture the same way they trust, real estate. There's really a transparency and an honesty here that, especially in these sort of inclusion-centric projects is kind of a godsend, because trying to pull the curtain over large social issues is a surefire way to getting nothing done.
I love that. Yeah.
So
let's just be honest with ourselves. I think that's what we're trying to do in this series is let's pull away those curtains and let's have the real conversation so that we can make ourselves and make our businesses better.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talked about, women are underserved, youth, agriculture, in Rwanda at least. You are a young female tech entrepreneur there.
Ironic.
What is that like? Both the good and the bad.
Well, I think, of course, I'm going to contradict myself here because I just said how great it is, to be transparent and honest about things. But for me, I think a healthy sense of denial also helps. I'm also young. I was 23 when I started the company. I'm 27 now. So by most accounts, I'm still really young. So, and that's hard. My team is young, and I think there have certainly been situations where we've walked into client meetings and it's been, what is this little American girl doing? And, how is she going to help me, in my business? What does she know? So we definitely come across that. I think at one point I was sitting at a meeting with someone else on my team, and the first question was, "Where are your husbands? Do they know you're doing this?"
Wow. Oh, geez.
So
yeah.
There's a little bit of that, but I think also you have to take everything with like a little grain of salt, a little bit of a sense of humor. And I think if you internalize it and you build it up in your mind, I'm young, or I'm a woman, or I'm a foreigner, or, whatever it is, I think that's something that you project outwards. So for better or worse, I tend not to think of it a lot, but there are realities that creep through. It's, sometimes it's difficult to manage people. I would say just personally, managing people has probably been the most difficult part of this for me. It's not something that I had done a lot before this. And so figuring out, well, how do you manage a man who's older than you,
right,
who maybe doesn't want to be told what to do by someone female or his junior or both. And then I think you're also trying to set a good example. You're also trying to raise money from investors. So if, anyone's been following the news about Silicon Valley sexism, I mean, it's hard to say, well, how much of it was the fact that we're running a obscure business in an obscure part of the world versus being a female founding team. My co-founder is also a woman. So, there's parts of that, but I think we were able to establish credibility through other ways, maybe that sort of circumvented or at least got us through the door. A partnership with Microsoft, for example, is a pretty big feather in the cap. We have an amazing advisory board who we would not be here without them. And they are incredibly, high-placed, very well-respected professionals in their respected fields. And, their sort of contribution of time and advice and other resources, it was, very helpful for us. And then, of course, we have to know what we're doing. We have to know what we're talking about. We have to understand our clients' issues. And when people ask us where our husbands are, we just sort of have to laugh and say, well, at home, or whatever the story is. So you have to be able to laugh a little bit.
Oh, goodness. If we didn't laugh, we'd have nothing. Yeah. Laugh and love. I think we need to be aware. And for those that are listening, those unconscious biases and those moments when you say something like just that you think that's funny in a meeting, oh, you're young, where's your husband, that you think is a funny joke, it sticks with somebody. And it makes you feel less.
I'm going to remember that forever.
Yeah, and you're going to remember. And we need to be aware of those moments. And that's man, female, young, old, doesn't matter. You're unlocking right now, Kate. A lot of things are important discussions. Ageism. How do the older workforce work with the younger workforce? Men and women. How do you work? Tech versus not. VC. There's a lot of things that we have to unfold. And that awareness to me is that first step. And I love what you talked about is how crucial your advisory board was. What other mentorship or resources do you think have been crucial in helping you get to where you are?
For me, and I think anyone involved, either regardless of how close or how far out into the periphery of our organization, I think everyone would tell you that we have really good people. We don't always have, not everyone is always great, myself included. Like, we all have our faults, but we have really good people. I think that not only is a mechanism to move a company forward and develop a great product and attract the right kind of clients, but I think it's also running a startup or building a startup is hard. Working for a startup is hard. You're in unflexible and simultaneously very flexible environments. You are resource strapped. So, your benefits aren't going to look the same as, they do if you work for a large corporation. The hours can be tough. If you're living on the West Coast or even in the East Coast of the US, but you're working with developing markets, you're going to be up at all hours. There's a very high degree of ambiguity, and there's a huge probability of failure. And I think something that, is any young organization needs is sort of this core of supporters, whether it's the team itself or whether it's, if it's an advisory board or a more formal board of directors or just sort of people on your speed dial. I mean, I know myself and the senior members of our team, they all have incredible family and friend support. My husband is supportive. We have advisors who pick up the phone because I need to ask them something technical or complex, or they pick up the phone because, I just need to rant about something that, whoever the first one to answer, can listen. But
are your advisors men, women, old, young?
Yeah, men, women. I've actually never thought about the split. Some are older than others, some are young, but all of them are equal in just their jaw-dropping contribution and, humility in their service with us. We try to convene about 2 to 3 times a year. Sometimes it's a little less, to be honest, but they're just, and they come from all walks. So we have people that are in the tech business. We have a professor. We have people in development. We have people from insurance companies, from big banks. It's really sort of a wide swath of individuals, but I wouldn't trade any of them for the world. And we've gotten really close as a result, which is, only further strengthens, not only what we get out of the advisory board, but also I hope what we give to them. And at the end of the day, it's about having a great product and a great impact.
Absolutely. So my last question as we close up here, for those that are listening to our partners, many of our partners are CEOs and entrepreneurs, and they're jack of all trades, they're founders, etc. They're men, they're women. If you're trying to create this culture that you've created, where there's a value of different perspectives and giving back, what tips or advice do you have?
Oh, wow. I think every organization is structured in a different way. Every organization is trying to accomplish something different. I think something that we traditionally have done very well in sort of this building culture is just to really enable everyone to be who they are. It's funny, people are always commenting on, so my co-founder and I look very similar. Like, we're both roughly the same height. We both have long, dark hair, round faces, so it's sort of funny, but people are always commenting on how we could not be 2 more different people.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. Whereas I tend to be a little bit more like linear in my thinking and a little bit stronger in my words and actions. Mary is sort of the softening force. And so I think that, from like a leadership dynamic is really helpful because, whereas sometimes like I get down to the brass tacks and things just need to get done. And, I provide a lot more structure when, that doesn't always work, and it doesn't always work for everyone. And so I think having a diverse set of personalities, we have one employee who was recently going through some personal troubles, and, he went to go see Mary. But, then when it was down to, okay, I want to map out something for my professional development and, need kind of a tougher, more honest critique, he came to me. So I think when you're building like a team culture, to have and be open to sort of different personalities, it helps the organization grow. It helps employees sort of find their niche. And there are a lot of times, even in the product development conversations, where I'll say, well, I don't understand why the client won't just, do it this way, and Mary is sort of that moderating force who can come in and say, all right, well, like, how can we be more accommodating, or how can we think about this in a different angle? So, people always say you hire people who are just like you. And I think there's truth to that. But I think if you make a concerted effort to really just hire good people, regardless of how similar or different they are to you, at the end of the day, you should be the dumbest one in the room. And every day that you are, you're doing something right.
Absolutely. Always hire smarter than you, right?
Exactly. You should be uncomfortable. If you're in a startup and everybody is just doing what you say and saying yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, you're doing something wrong, because you're not gonna create anything new out of your own head, because otherwise someone else would have done it already. It's really it has to be a product of a combination of people, perspectives, experiences, etc.
Well, that's perfect. That's a perfect way to end, Kate. We really appreciate you taking the time to call us all the way from Rwanda. Thank you so much, and best of luck. You're doing incredible work out there.
Thank you. I appreciate the time, and good luck with the rest of the series.
Thanks for listening to Include. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what you think. And please join the conversation on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter at MS Partner.